Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying the Fruitful Life series that we've been doing. And Tyler Wood is here with me today, and he's just going to help me with a little interview. We want to share a few things about a fruitful life with you. And I'm really excited, Tyler, to be able to do this and have a conversation. Yeah. Tyler grew up at HelenaFirst. He's been a part of our community for a long time, served on the Helena Police Force for 7 years, and another police department for a couple years before that, 9 years total. And so great to have you here, Tyler.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So
it's awesome. Hey, let's just start with, this all came about, our conversation all started with you and I sitting down at Stefano's just across the street from the church, having a conversation there. And to be honest with you, I don't even remember what we ate because the conversation was so good. But it was salad, that's right. But if we could go back, what got you into even the idea of becoming a police officer? What was your motivation for that?
Yeah, so my dad, for the longest time, was with the volunteer fire department. Kind of grew up in the emergency services. We had a close family friend that was in law enforcement locally, and it just appealed to me just to be able to go and help people. And I was really young. I didn't really know what it was, but at a young age, I knew that I wanted to either be in the fire service or in law enforcement. And so I started pursuing that in high school, and kind of went from there. So,
wow, thanks for doing that. The law enforcement, first responders, people that are driving the ambulances, the fire department, those people all have a big job. There's a lot of weighty things that they see. And I know you experienced some of those things. One of the things we talked about was one of the first tragedies that you experienced. Could you kind of share a little bit about what happened and the advice that you were given, as a result of that?
Yeah, so I was 19 or 20 at the time when I got hired. I couldn't even buy ammunition for my pistol that I carried. But I responded to a call. A young boy had died. He had fallen off a waterfall in Livingston, Montana. And that was really hard for me because, to see that and, see death for the first time and not really understand what it was and what it was about. I grew up in the church and in a home where, there was nothing tragic that happened. And so it was definitely a big shocker for me. I remember seeing that and not really knowing how to handle it. If I was going to tell my wife, if I wasn't going to tell my wife. And I remember my sergeant at the time tell me, he must have seen in my face that I was struggling, because he said, understand that if you can't deal with this kind of stuff, you really can't do this job. And he recommended I bury it and, I don't talk about it, and what is at work stays at work, and when you go home, you're supposed to be this different person and, feel different about things. And so that was the advice that I was given, was to bury it. And kind of how I was raised in my heart, seeing death was really hard for me.
Yeah, I bet. I think it's probably hard for all of us, those challenges. And I don't know if people always think about, I don't always think about, what the police officers and fire department people and people driving the ambulances and the first responders, what they are confronted with on a daily basis, and just the pressure there. And just what they have to digest and kind of live with. And maybe we could just pause for a minute and how would you encourage people at HelenaFirst and in our community to respond to those people, pray for those people? What can we do to be supportive of those folks?
For me, when I was doing it, it wasn't uncommon where I would just have left some sort of death or tragic, and I'd be finally sitting down for a meal and somebody would see me, and you never know what emergency personnel's been through and what they've seen. And, just respect and just, let them know that you care about them and that you're thinking about them, that you're praying for them. I know there was a lot of times that, that's how people reacted to me when they saw me. And that just, it made you, makes you feel good that,
That's
okay,
awesome.
It's,
Yeah.
I'm not, law enforcement and fire, they're not just out, causing problems or, pulling people over because they got a quota to fill.
Great joy, right?
It's there's a whole nother side of it that I wasn't aware of either when I first got into it, that is very tragic and very hard mentally and physically for, emergency services to see and deal with. And so, just being respectful, and
we got to take care of the people that take care of us.
Yeah,
I want to encourage you to do that. Like, let's take care of the people that take care of us. And if you're a first responder, you work in the police force, you're in the fire department, like, we want to thank you for everything you do. Thanks for serving our community and taking care of us. So, but anyway, you became good at kind of, or so you thought, at stuffing things down, right? Like, that was just the first tragedy of many situations. But, like for most of us, most of those things over time, it's like a beach ball underwater. Like, you can only hold that down for so long before it's gonna pop back up. And I think that started happening in your life, right? The trying to hold everything together and hold it down. And what did that look like for you, Tyler? Like, what started happening in your life as a result of just trying to push all that stuff in? Yeah,
it didn't work out well. For me, I went through different stages in my life. I love my wife, and I'm surprised, and I applaud to her that she put up with me for so long. She told me once that she's been married to 4 different Tylers, and that's kind of how it comes out when you're not taking care of yourself. Is, I went through different phases where I was zoned out, and at first it was really just being zoned out. I'd come home, so many different things had happened, but I'd come home and I'd just zone out, and I would, I'd get on my phone and I'd scroll through Facebook, or, I wouldn't really be there. I'd just be kind of this ghost on the couch, and, I didn't know how to process, and, so there was that zoning out phase, and then it got to a point where I became angry, and, I'd come home and I'd show signs of anger. I took out aggression, never towards, my family members, but, I'd get really upset over little stuff, like my dog would dig a hole in the backyard, and I'd just become so enraged and angry, and, and that's stuff that I didn't grow up with. Yep. So it wasn't like, I grew up in a home where my dad was angry all the time, or, anything like that. Like, it was a direct result of me not taking care of my mental health and me pushing God aside. And it was scary, like, looking back now and seeing, like, all the different phases of my life and what happened and kind of what led up to, ultimately what got plastered all over the news. Just shows the importance of taking care of yourself, your mental health, putting God first, and all those things. But really, I did go through 4 different stages of my life, and I started coping with my anger and things that I was dealing with through alcohol, through spending money, through a lot of very unhealthy things.
Yeah.
So.
And you wouldn't be the first. Like, we all have our coping mechanisms when we're not handling things right.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge for us, because so often we're not prepared for those things in life, and I don't think there's a single person that's probably even watching right now that can't relate on some level of the stress that we're going through, whether it's at home or in our job or wherever, and we whether we're self-medicating or we're depressed because we're pushing those things down, or getting angry, and it comes out in many different ways. For you, you reference, for you, it kind of led to this, not pinnacle moment, but a climax in your life, like the pushing down and the trying to deal with things. It ended up that you were in court yourself, and did you ever really see yourself being a defendant in court, or could you just kind of share what happened and how you got there?
Yeah, it was, really over almost 10 years of, and it didn't always start this way. Like when I first got into law enforcement, it was, I did have God in my life, and, he was kind of in the center, I think. And, I wanted to do the right thing, but all this stuff kind of started happening, and I started changing, and it got to a point over a 10-year time frame that I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know that I could get help. I didn't know that, it was okay to seek therapy, to fix myself. And I tried to do it on my own, and it didn't work. There was a time in my life where towards the end of my career that, if the guys didn't want to go out and have beers after work, I would go to the gas station, get a 6-pack, and start drinking on my way home. And like that, it blows my mind. Like sitting here today, it blows my mind that this happened. Like that I became that person that I told myself I would never be, that I would never be on that other side, because you see it on the news, and you see it on social media, when cops make mistakes. Yep. And I never thought in my life that this would happen to me, because there's no reason it should happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
so you got so deep into a hole, you really got depressed. You felt hopeless.
Yeah.
And the truth is, though, like right now we're having this conversation, and you are not the same person that you were sitting in that courtroom.
Yeah.
Not the same person you were 8 months ago or 10 months ago. Mm-hmm. When we talked, really, you felt like your life was kind of fruitless, like just full of anger and all those kind of things. And there's been a significant change. What happened? What changed about you, Tyler?
So when initially all this kind of happened last year, I remember when all this came to be with the department and nobody else really knew about it. I remember talking to my wife and telling her what had happened. And I was in that moment, that first week that all this came to be, it was such a dark moment in my life. Suicide was heavy on my mind, which is hard for me to even say. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. I thought for sure I was going to lose my family. I lost, I had to resign from my position. It was horrible. Yep. I didn't know what was going to happen. I felt so worthless. But I got on my knees and I prayed, because I didn't know what else to do. And thank God I did, because I'm here today, and there's so much purpose in my life moving forward, and I know I have an opportunity to help so many people that, I maybe wouldn't have been able to had I remained in law enforcement, and had I not had something, drastic happen. Yeah. And, I'm thankful, but I prayed. I put God first for the first time in probably 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, who knows?
Yeah.
But I put God first, and I prayed for my wife, not that, you know, I prayed that first week. That's all I knew what to do is
recentering our life on Jesus is the ultimate thing that changes our life, getting on mission with him and putting God back at the center of our life. I know that, you know, in addition to that, you did some other proactive things. You told me about going to a place called Mighty Oaks. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, one of my favorite stories, you know, kind of came out of that. Like, can you just share about that experience that you had there and what happened?
Yeah, so that first week, like I said, I spent a lot of time on my knees praying by myself, not knowing what was going to happen. But I started, when I put God first, after that week and everything started happening, like I felt such at peace, where I shouldn't have felt peace. I mean, really, you know, considering everything that's happened, but I had such a overwhelming peace about, you know, what was going to happen moving forward. And change started happening. I started rebuilding my marriage, my relationship with my kids, my stress. I mean, I seeked, you know, therapy and went to, you know, a lot of different resources that I had available. And one of the biggest things that changed leading up to Mighty Oaks was after a couple months of really focusing my life on God and putting God first, like everything kind of started falling back in place. And I remember laying on the floor with my kids in my living room, and my son Derek, and I had grown my hair out, you know, and a beard, and you know, my kids were used to bald dad and no facial hair, and you know, that life, that's all they ever knew was that life. And my son looks up at me and he told me that he liked this version of me better.
Wow.
He said, and just for him at 6 years old at the time to recognize that there's been such a drastic change in dad. It crushed my heart, but it made me realize, like, okay, there's a lot more to life than the job I had, you know, or what I thought I was doing. And I really saw change in me, in my family, you know, and then I started coming to church again. A friend of mine that goes here as well had recommended this program, Mighty Oaks, and at first I was like, psh, you know, Mighty Oaks, I don't need that. You know, the typical, you know, and this isn't going to happen to me, right. You know, I don't need some program.
I got this, right.
I got this, I'm okay. But I wasn't, you know, I still needed that boost, that, you know, I needed to continue to rebuild this relationship, continue to rebuild my relationship with my wife and my kids and my family. And a couple months went by. He gave me the application for Mighty Oaks, and Mighty Oaks it's considered a men's legacy program, is what they call it. It's an outstanding program for first responders military, law enforcement, fire, emergency services, you name it. It's free. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't cost anything. It's a great program, and I recommend the program for a lot of people. You know, even if even if you don't go through something tragic or a crisis, it can help you, you know, get through a lot of things like it helped me. And my wife decided that she was going to basically force me to fill out the application, which thank God she did. And so I filled it out, and I really didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'm not going to get selected. You know, this and then like 2 days later, I got a call saying, "Hey, you've been selected. We want you to, we want you to be here. Come to this program." And the program says faith-based, but it is very much so like a Bible boot camp for for first responders, and it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. You're with a bunch of military and first responders, and they really teach you. Their motto is never fight alone. And what they mean by that is, you have the resources. Everybody has the resources. Be in the Bible, be in church, be in prayer, and be around other men and women that that have the same goal.
We're better together.
And you don't have to go through this alone. And I remember being there and just that feeling of, okay, this is going to be life-changing. But there was that part of me that was missing. For me, I was having a really hard time like forgiving myself of what had happened. And because it was so out of character for me. I've never done anything wrong in my life, and here I am I'm in court, I'm, going through all this stuff, and I'm wondering why, and I was having a really hard time forgiving myself. But when I got there, there was this tree out in the distance that was miles away, and I made the decision like the first day when I got there, and I was standing on the ledge of this property, and you're up in the mountains, and there's this lone tree that's just far out in the distance.
And you thought it was the mighty oak.
It was a mighty oak tree. It literally looked like, a mighty oak tree. And I just thought, I'm going to run to that tree. And so it wasn't the first day, but the next day I skipped lunch and I went on a run, and I started running. I had no idea really how far or, what the, how bad of a run it was or how easy of a run it was. But about halfway there, which I think was about 2 miles into it, I'm like, I'm listening to worship music and I'm just running. But something hit me during that run, and I just started crying about halfway there. And God spoke to me in that moment, and he said, when you get to that tree, you'll be free. And to me, it was God telling me that when you get to that tree, he's forgiving me, and it's not up to me to forgive myself, but that God's going to do that.
It's awesome.
And I started sprinting, and I got to the tree, and I just felt this overwhelming weight lifted off my shoulders. In that moment, I had connected with God in a way that I never have in my entire life, and I saw so much purpose with God's vision for me. And it wasn't a mighty oak tree. This is the funny part. It was like a whittled, wannabe mighty oak tree. But throughout the program, I had learned that a lot of guys had taken that step forward and ran to that tree. And what it meant to me was, you get there and it's not this beautiful, amazing tree like you see it in the distance, but it was discolored, it was shrunk down, it looked like you could walk up and push it over. And to me I realized that that was God's way of absorbing everyone's sins and failures and setting them free, and it's a beautiful oak tree to me.
That's right.
Because that's what I saw, and that's what it was. But in that moment, I realized, like, all of these things that happened were because I chose not to put God first, not to put my wife first, not to put my family first, but to put me first. And I started struggling and coping with my demons in unhealthy ways. And, I got to a breaking point, and it's different for everybody. Unfortunately, mine was how it was, but I look back now and I realize that I would have never gotten out of law enforcement. I would have never been able to get to my full potential and what God has planned for me had I remained in that atmosphere.
Yep.
And really the only way for me to be able to move forward like I have been is to not have that be a part of my life.
Wow.
And actually focus on my family and the things that are important. Without self-discipline and consistency in every aspect of your life, failure is going to happen. And even with it, it's going to happen.
Yep.
But to me, and what I learned through this program was, put God first and foremost. God needs to be the center of your life all the time, and that's what I started doing after this program and, shortly before it. So
That's awesome. It's funny and interesting, the series we're doing on A Fruitful Life, every passage of Scripture, there's a tree in it, all the way back in the Garden of Eden, this tree of temptation, to the fig tree that Jesus curses, to the worn out tree that Jesus hung on, which is where we're at, to the mighty oak that wasn't a mighty oak. And I hope that every time people in our church see a tree, they think Fruitful Life, because you experience that forgiveness from God. Matter of fact, somebody spoke a word over you from the Bible and said, there's therefore now no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. Yeah. And like when I think of that worn out, weathered tree, I think of the cross, and I think the cross, that tree, speaks that same message to all of us, right? There is therefore now no condemnation for those that are in Christ, and that our lives have been changed from fruitless to fruitful when we make Jesus the center and we put God in charge. Mm-hmm. You kind of showed me the thumbs up, thumbs down. Could you tell everybody that real quick before we wrap up?
Yeah. So something that this program made me realize, and kind of going through all this, is I feel like when I got there, my priorities were flipped. So, how it should be is thumbs up. You should have God first, your wife, your kids, your family, and your job should be down here. Well, mine was reversed. I had my job first. I had my friends and family, my kids, my wife, and God. And I don't even think, God was kind of not even there.
Marginalized, right?
But, think thumbs up. And if you can commit your life to that,
yep.
To that,
yep.
That's extremely important moving forward. And for me, and you had preached earlier during this series about, God's no.
Yep.
And I look back at what happened, and when you allow certain things into your life, God can change your story and where you're going to go, yep. because He has a better plan for you. Absolutely. And for me, law enforcement was unhealthy for me. Yep. I loved my job, and I still love law enforcement, but it got to a point that it was very unhealthy for me. Yep. And God's way of saying no to my dreams and ambitions to be a law enforcement officer was His way of saying, I have a bigger plan for you. And, I'm excited to see where my life's going.
That's good. So. And really when you think about it, a lot of times we love our job and not our God. And what we need to do is do our job and love our God. And that's part of a fruitful life, right?
Yeah.
And Tyler, the big thing, and we'll kind of wrap up here, you mentioned your whole life has changed. Now it's gone from, you didn't just mention job on top, but you were, when we talked, you're like me on top,
Yeah.
and God down here. And now that it's become, thumbs up, God on top, your whole life's about, I want to serve others, I want to help others, which is a fruitful life, right? Because fruitfulness, a fruit tree doesn't eat its own fruit. Fruitfulness is about others. And so what are you doing now? Like, what's happened in your life? What are you pursuing to help other people?
Well, it's funny. So God has really shut the door, like, for me to be working for somebody. I applied for a lot of jobs, and God shut the door. And my wife and I thought of this business plan and opportunity. I love being outside, and I love, I love spending time with my family. And I thought, well, I'm gonna open my own business, and I work towards becoming, and now I am certified as a home inspector. And I opened up a business that's called Browtine Property Services. And I do handyman work, lawn care, and home inspections. And it's still new and fresh, but business is there, and I've, been successful in scheduling appointments, and
It's great.
God just kept opening the door for this business opportunity, and it's something that, I'm doing with my wife, Sam, and, we can do it together, and it's, part of her dreams too. And we've really come together as a family, and, I can build my own schedule and be home with my family more, and, go camping and do the things that we love. And, God has really showed, like, right now in this moment in my life, this is what you need to do. And this is, I'm going to open the door for you. And I promise you, like, every,
Yep.
he said no. And I was kind of against it at first, I didn't really, I was like, no, I need to get a job and go to work every day and work for someone. And, but God has really showed me the potential that I have to help other people with this too. And, be able to hire, someone that's in need, and be able to help in a way that I would have never been able to.
Yep.
And so.
Well, and I love, as much as what you're doing, I love the reason you're doing it is to help other people, and putting God first. And the big takeaways for me are, to move from fruitlessness to fruitfulness, like putting Jesus in first place in your life, falling to your knees if you need to, and calling out to God, getting connected with other people, and whatever you need to do to get help. And like we talked about a couple weeks ago, making the most of your manure, like not getting upset or complaining about bad things that have happened, whether they're your fault or someone else's fault, but like, how can I learn from my regrets, experience the forgiveness of God, and move forward, right? Yeah. Tyler, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing with us. And
Absolutely.
I know it's going to be a benefit and blessing to other people. Thanks a ton.